All right, so I guess I can take it off. So, hi everyone, my name is Umair. I'm a third year medical student at UofT. So let's get into these essays. I'll just be going over some general tips that I think are helpful as you start writing these essays, and then Sarah will go further into some of those clusters and other things you should be keeping in mind. So, both all the essays that you have, they require you to talk about personal experiences. I'm pretty sure they all directly ask you to talk about a personal experience. So here's some points that I have that I think would be helpful. So the first is that you want to be reflective, you want to be vulnerable, and you want to show growth. So what this does is that it makes your experience sound more impactful, and it shows that it was a meaningful experience to you. It also shows that you're able to be critical about your experiences and learn from them. And overall, it just makes the experience sound more memorable to the reader as well. So when you're writing these essays, you don't want to shy away about, talking about failure. Tell me about the failure and then how you were able to bounce back from it, what you were able to learn from that experience in the process. And it's important to keep in mind that you don't want to brag about your accomplishments. They don't really care about your accomplishments. They want you to use these essays as an opportunity to show how you developed as a person and how you've developed qualities that would make you a good physician. The second point is that anecdotes are very powerful. So, if when you're talking about an experience, you don't want to just highlight, what your responsibilities and the basics of the duties of whatever you were doing. You want to share like a meaningful experience, and you want to kind of paint a story for me. So, for example, if you're talking about an experience where you were in a hospital, you maybe want to talk about a specific patient interaction that you had, and really try to paint that experience for the reader. And then the next point that I have is that you want to try to be unique, but you don't want to overthink this. So obviously everyone wishes that they had super cool experiences like, curing cancer, being a firefighter, or something like that. But in reality, not everyone does. I think in general, it's important to try to pick an experience that isn't cookie cutter. So let's say like a hospital volunteer per se. And that's because, if you choose something more unique, like let's say you're an athlete or you're doing any, really cool extracurriculars, that might help you stand out a bit. But that being said, you still want to show that your experience would make you a good fit for medicine, and you still want to be able to connect that experience back to, whatever the question is asking. So if you have a really valuable experience that would show you that you're a good fit for medicine, even if that was like a hospital volunteer or something, you might be able to write a more impactful and meaningful essay with that experience. So, in my opinion, it's always kind of a balance of trying to pick an experience that would help you stand out, but also being able to pick an experience that you can reflect on really well and effectively answer the question with. So, you also want to try to, or you really want to connect back to medicine in these essays. At least I did for all of my essays. And then I think for your ABS essay, they directly ask you to. And when you do this, you want to be very explicit. So you want to say that, this experience taught me this, and in medicine, we do this. So you want to make it very clear for them. You don't want the reader to kind of have to stop and think about it because, they're reading through like hundreds of essays and they want to be able to read that essay and tell how you would make a good physician as a result of whatever you wrote. Um, yeah, and then the last point that I kind of have is answer the question. So this sounds pretty straightforward, but you'd be surprised that a lot of people try to focus on, sounding very eloquent and poetic and whatnot, and they don't actually effectively answer what the question is asking. So always keep that in mind. And up here, I just kind of have some values that you can find on the Temerity Faculty of Medicine page. So these are just some values that U of T strives to cultivate in their medical students. So if you can, you don't have to, explicitly mention these word for word, try to hit buzzwords or anything like that. But if you can try to reflect these within your response, it would help convey that you'd be a good fit for the MD program. And yeah, now I'll pass it off to Sarah.
Hey guys, I'm Sarah. I'm a second year medical student at U of T, and I fully agree with everything Omer just said. I actually did literally everything he did in my own essays, and I'll just start by repeating one of the points he had about anecdotes. These questions, they're very general and honestly, everyone's gonna say something similar. They'll have the same points. How you will stand out is by using your anecdotes, your experiences. And be specific. Use those interactions that you've had in those experiences to support what you're saying. For example, in one of my essays, I remember talking about a volunteer experience I had, and I spoke about this one person I helped. Obviously, I de-identified him by using a fake name or saying that this person was an individual or they, them, whatever. And then I just spoke about that interaction. I spoke about what I learned, like he had food insecurity, and how I basically showed them, I demonstrated my actions to help that person by, for example, contacting a food bank or doing XYZ to support that person. Like talking about these specific interactions really makes you stand out because a lot of people don't do that in U of T essays. And I think that is what most of my peers also did. And we got interviews in that way. So I think anecdotes again are very important. That's why I thought I should say it again. My next point is avoid overusing buzzwords. Buzzwords actually are things you see in these clusters. For example, saying a phrase such as, I showed reliability or I showed perseverance and responsibility in this experience. These are buzzwords and they don't really help much. Remember that the person reading your application will probably see the qualities shown in your story. And you can use that space. U of T essays are very short. You can instead use that space to highlight what you've learned instead of saying, oh, I showed responsibility, I communicated well, or I collaborated well. I would say that is a better use of your space, talking about those learning outcomes and connecting it to your future in medicine rather than overdoing with the buzzwords. And most people actually use these buzzwords to try and show these clusters, which is the next point I have. Um, I use clusters myself, the clusters to write my essays. Remember, your two brief personal essays are graded separately from your ABS and the ABS statement. At least that's what I heard from everyone I spoke to and medical students who got in before me. So, I would say if you were to show the clusters, show it across the two brief personal essays and separately for the ABS and ABS statement. Let's talk about the brief personal essays. For example, if you want to show like the clusters throughout it, you can focus on two traits in one essay and two traits in the other. And I would look at the bigger picture when using clusters. You don't need to go into all of those specifics like maturity, reliability, whatever. Just try and show the overall quality of professional or overall quality of communicator in your anecdotes. And a lot of people have trouble with the scholar cluster in the essays because it's kind of hard to demonstrate academic standing or publications in your essays. I would instead focus on the leadership aspect and any experience where you kind of show critical thinking and where you think outside the box, where you're creative, where you show social responsibility in your thinking. And that will essentially tick their box. Now, when using clusters, I would advise you to watch out because sometimes you might lose sight of answering the question or speaking about those anecdotes and speaking about your learning outcomes. So just like don't forget about those things when you're trying to hit all the points in the clusters. I think they're used as kind of like a marking scheme, but I don't think it's been shared how they use them. I would just focus on showing the overall qualities. My last thing is don't compare your essays to everyone else's. I remember panicking sometimes when I was writing these essays because someone else had this different idea, or one other person wrote more about their anecdote or more about learning outcomes or whatever. Just try to highlight your own voice. Your experiences are unique. Just try to help make that shine. Don't compare your experience to someone else's. And one last thing I forgot to mention earlier, which kind of relates back to the first point, is the show and not tell phrase that I used extensively in my own essays. Remember, if you're saying that you did some action, you want to back it up with your experience. And it's a little hard to say, but hard to explain. But avoid like just stating your CV and saying I did this by doing this experience, like doing being a leader in this club or whatever. I would just actually show the experience, show interactions, and so on. Yeah, so that is all for me. I think we're just
So thank
answering
you
questions.
both. And I want to mention Umair and Sarah are both on the brightdoctor.com/marketplace if you wish to chat with them more about your application. Let's get to the Q&A. Do y'all have any questions for our two speakers? If and dear speakers, please open the Q&A. You can click answer live if you're going to take that question.